in my opinion, earth anchors or cable stakes or whatever you want to call them, disposable stakes are the way to go over rebar. You know, they're so convenient. You can have them already hooked up to your traps. They take up less space. I just think that's the ideal and the optimal way to go. But there are some tricks to using them, and you know, it may not be evident right off the bat, but you know, if you're a beginning trapper, you may not realize it until you're out on the line, frustrated and trying to get your trap set, that some of those tricks come into play. So I was just going to outline a few of those for you. You know, one trap or one anchor is a bullet stake that I started out using, and I mean, I like them a lot. They're really good. Or an Iowa disposable stake, an IDS. You know, you've got your stake driver. You slide it into the hole, hammer down in the ground, and bam, you're good to go. Pull your driver out, and the anchor sets, and it's going to hold. You know, it's going to hold really nice. The one issue that I've encountered with these, and sometimes you'll encounter, is the tip of your driver can actually start to mushroom. And so if the tip of your driver starts to mushroom, it'll get hung up when you're hammering that stake into the ground. It'll get hung up. If it mushrooms and you're driving that stake into the ground, that driver's going to get hung up in there. When you try to pull out, it's not going to pull out. And so you know, your best bet there is to keep an eye on it. And if you notice that every once in a while when you try to pull that stake driver out that it's a little bit tough coming, you need to take a Dremel tool or a side grinder or a die grinder or something and grind that down some, just to make sure, because that's really frustrating when you're driving that stake in the ground. You go to pull your driver out and your stake comes out with it. Well, then that hole is no good to use anymore. You know, I try to use another hole, but so that's one trick. You know, if you're having trouble with your stakes sticking to your driver and your stakes coming out when you're using your driver, make sure that the end of that driver is not mushrooming and getting hung up in that stake. I would also recommend any of your drivers, when you're pulling them out, give them a little twist. Make sure that if there's anything that was binding in or holding it loose, you know, tight in there, you know, a little twist is going to break it loose and hopefully make it come out easier. Another stake setup that I like to use and I've grown more fond of is a Pogo stake, and I'll show you up close what these are. It's simply a washer style stake, or it's simply a washer, a fender washer, so it's got a small hole in the middle, and it's got a J hook that goes through the hole and that you hook onto your cable or chain, whatever you're using. And so they're cheap and easy to make, and I consider them disposable. But you do have to have a specific stake driver. Specific about these drivers, it's got your slot for your J hook in there, and one end is tapered or grooved differently than the other. See how that's flat? That's for the end of the J hook, and then your other ones is angled for the, I guess you could call it the head of the J hook, or the actual hook of the J hook. So you've got to be sure when you put it in, and it's got obviously your slot in your center for your washer to go in. When you put that in place, you've got to make sure that and see, that's not totally correct. That's how you want it. And another part of being properly loaded is that the opening of the J hook is facing down, not up. That way there's no possibility of the J hook actually opening as it's as you're driving it in, that it's, you know, it's going to stay closed and locked. That's properly loaded into your driver. So then when you drive that down into the ground, pull your driver out. That's how your stake and your washer is going to ultimately wind up, is flat in the ground, and that's got a lot of good holding power. One thing that can happen is your tips where your slot is, sometimes those can kind of start coming together, or they can get full of mud. You know, if you're in real hard or rocky areas, they can kind of get either forced together or forced apart. And if they start to get forced together or get full of mud, I try to keep a flathead screwdriver in my trapping bag so that I can kind of clean it out as I need to. And you know, if it's starting to get forced together and the washer's what's getting hung up, I can stick that flathead in that groove, that slot for the washer, and try to, you know, kind of open it up and spread it out. And then also, one thing that I encountered was with using the hooks that I were using. You know, these are heavy duty crunch proof. These are heavy duty J hooks, and they've got this end on them that's specific for your driver, so that's exactly what you got to have. And on some, I think it was on bridger traps, and so that it fits, you know, just like that. On bridger traps, or on there are some J hooks that are actually kind of beveled, and so instead of just a flat surface like this, it's actually angled in. And I tried using those before without really thinking about how they would work or react with my driver. And when using those beveled hooks got hung up and just got, as I pounded the stake down into the ground, that just pounded them harder into the driver and really hung things up. And so I had to go through and remake all my stakes, swapping them out with these heavy duty J hooks. So you know, that chance that I was trying to be a little bit cheap kind of backfired on me. So just make sure, you know, if you're using something that has to be assembled, make sure that you're using them, you know, the exact things that need to be used for that item. One thing I like about these drivers specifically is that they've got a handle, and now typically it has a handle on both sides. Obviously mine's been broken off from years of use and hammering on them, but you know, once this gets down into the ground, that handle's good for you to give it a little twist and pull it up. And that's what I always try to do, like I said before, is just give that thing a twist, turn it 90 or 180 degrees, and then pull it up. And you know, if it gets a little bit hung, take your trapping hammer, bang on it one way and another, bang on it on the top, and pull it up like that. And then sometimes it may get really hung, maybe really tough to get, and in those cases I'll take my trapping hammer and just use it and just really bring it up and, you know, kind of slam it into my handle to try to pop that thing loose and pop it out. So those are just two of the things that can kind of get you hung up and to watch out for, because when you are setting your traps and you are trying to stake them down, the most frustrating thing is when that stake keeps coming out of the ground as you pull your traps up. The most frustrating thing is that stake coming out of the ground when you're pulling the driver out.